Danielle Brooks looked like any other woman walking through the mall that morning. She wore a simple blue hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. No designer bag, no loud perfume. Just quiet confidence and a focus that never needed to announce itself. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun. Her phone stayed in her pocket. Her hands were free. And yet, unknown to almost everyone passing her by, she owned the entire building under their feet. At 32 years old, Danielle had built her success in silence. She didn't inherit money. She earned every dollar flipping homes, studying property law at night, and learning real estate by walking into rooms where no one looked like her and refusing to leave. She was a wife to Marcus, a firefighter who supported her dreams without fear, and a mother to Zoe, a 7-year-old who had already memorized her mother's favorite quote, "Move with purpose. Speak only when it matters." Danielle didn't need attention. She needed results. Jennings Plaza Mall was her latest acquisition. A 3-story shopping complex in the heart of Atlanta, filled with trendy boutiques, cafes, and a private office suite on the top floor of her office. She visited once a week for quiet meetings with her team, always arriving unannounced to see how the place truly ran when no one was watching. That morning, she walked through the staff corridor toward the elevator that led to her suite. She was halfway there when she heard firm footsteps behind her. A voice followed. It was Harold Jenkins, the head of mall security. He had worked at Jennings Plaza for 7 years. Middle-aged, gray at the temples, heavy with authority, and fully confident in his sense of who belonged and who didn't. He had never seen Danielle in person. He didn't recognize her name, let alone her face. He stopped her without hesitation. He saw a young black woman alone in a hoodie and assumed she didn't belong. He asked questions. He blocked her path. He spoke with suspicion. He assumed, without checking, that she was somewhere she shouldn't be. Danielle didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't try to prove herself. She simply reached into her pocket and handed him a card. White, plain, marked with a gold stripe. It read, "Jennings Plaza, property owner access." He laughed, accused her of faking it, asked her where she got it. She didn't flinch. She pulled out her phone, pressed a contact, and made a single call. 2 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Peter Langston, the mall's general manager, stepped out in a rush. He saw Danielle and turned pale. He apologized immediately, trying to fix what had already fallen apart. Then he turned to Harold, eyes sharp, voice heavy. He told him the truth. Danielle Brooks wasn't a guest. She wasn't a visitor. She was the owner of Jennings Plaza. The silence that followed felt thick. Harold blinked. His jaw tightened. He looked at Danielle like he was seeing her for the first time. Around them, employees froze. A woman from the cleaning staff stood still, mop in hand. A store manager dropped his clipboard. The name they had seen on paperwork, the person they assumed lived in some high-rise tower far away, was standing in front of them, calm, present, and very real. Danielle didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She didn't demand an apology. She simply turned and walked past the security guard without another word. She didn't need revenge. She had something better, the power to create change. Later that week, she held a mandatory meeting with all mall staff, no exceptions. Security, store owners, floor managers, everyone was required to sit down and listen. Danielle stood at the front of the room in black slacks and a navy blouse. No microphone. No slideshow, just her voice. She told them about the incident. She told them about her journey. She told them that judging people based on appearances was not just a mistake, it was a failure of character. She didn't fire Harold, not because he didn't deserve it, but because she believed in something more useful than punishment, education. She required him, along with every other employee in the building, to complete bias and anti-discrimination training, and not just once but quarterly. She didn't stop there. Danielle also launched a mentorship program right inside the mall. 3 young black girls from the community were selected to shadow her every weekend. She taught them ownership. She showed them contracts. She let them sit in on meetings. She told them what no one ever told her, that they had a right to own the rooms people often told them they didn't belong in. She never shared the story online. She didn't tweet about it. She didn't go viral. But she didn't need to. Real power doesn't seek attention. It shifts things. And she had shifted the entire culture of the mall with silence, structure, and strength. But just as it seemed like peace had settled back in, something else arrived. A red folder. Her assistant handed it to her quietly one morning in her office. Inside were documents, unsigned papers, real estate listings, and an email thread. Someone was trying to sell a part of her mall, behind her back, without her approval. Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't panic. She closed the folder, slowly stood up, and looked out the window. The battle for respect was over. The war for control had just begun. Danielle Brooks stood by the window, red folder in hand, eyes fixed on the skyline. The weight of betrayal didn't show on her face. Not yet. But inside, something shifted. Someone had crossed a line. Inside that folder were documents that shouldn't exist: emails, listings, financial drafts. Someone was trying to sell part of her mall quietly, illegally, and behind her back. It wasn't just disrespect. It was an attack. She turned from the window and sat at her desk. Her fingers moved with calm precision as she reread every page, every name, every signature. Then she found it. At the bottom of a printed email, John Kramer, one of her junior partners, trusted, liked, smiled in every meeting, someone she had given a seat at the table when others said he wasn't ready. He didn't just betray her trust, he tried to profit off it. Danielle didn't call him. She didn't send a warning. She picked up the phone and made one call to her lawyer. 3 days later, John walked into a boardroom that looked exactly like every other meeting they'd had. Same chairs, same table. But this time the air was different. He smiled when he walked in. Danielle didn't. She placed the red folder on the table, quietly slid it across to him. At first, he didn't react. He tried to talk, explain, joke. But when she didn't laugh, when she didn't say a word, he realized the joke was over. "I was going to tell you," he finally muttered. Danielle folded her hands. "No, you were going to steal from me. Let's call it what it is." His face turned red. The other board members watched, eyes wide, silent. Danielle opened her laptop, turned it toward the group, and played the recording, the one her assistant found buried in the building's security logs. John, late at night, in a private meeting room, talking to a third-party buyer about fake ownership shares, laughing, plotting. By the end of the video, no one in the room could look her in the eye. Danielle closed the laptop. Du stood up. "You're done," she said. "Not just here. I've sent the files to my attorney. We'll let the courts handle the rest." John didn't say a word. He picked up his coat and walked out. That should have been the end. But for Danielle, the damage wasn't just legal. It was personal. Someone she mentored had tried to cut her out of what she built. It wasn't the first time she'd been targeted, but this time it came from inside the circle. She didn't get bitter. She got sharper. She restructured her company that week, cut every silent partner, rewrote every contract, took back full control. And while others whispered about the scandal, she didn't respond. She expanded the mentorship program. She held a seminar for young Black businesswomen, hosted right there in the mall atrium. Over 200 showed up. Some were in suits, some in hoodies. But all of them left that day with something Danielle never had when she started proof that someone like them could win. 1 week later, Harold Jenkins, the same security guard from before, knocked on her office door. He stepped in nervously, holding something behind his back. Danielle looked up, said nothing. I wanted to say thank you," he mumbled, "for giving me another chance." Then he held out a small framed photo. It was of Danielle, speaking at the seminar, surrounded by teenage girls. Smiling. "Powerful. I hung this near the staff entrance," he said. "People need to know who you are now." She took the frame. For the first time in days, her face softened. "Thank you," she said. "Justice doesn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it comes when the people who once doubted you start standing up for you." But the story wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, Danielle received another letter. This time, anonymous. No return address. Just 4 words on the first page: "You weren't supposed to win." Attached was a photo, not of her, but of her daughter Zoe standing outside her school. Danielle's hands gripped the paper. Her breath slowed. This wasn't about business anymore. This was personal, and someone had just made the biggest mistake of their life. The envelope sat on her desk like a wound that wouldn't close. Danielle Brooks had faced betrayal before. She had been underestimated, ignored, even mocked. But this was different. This wasn't about business. It wasn't about ownership. It wasn't even about her. This time they came for her daughter. 4 words typed in bold on plain white paper. "You weren't supposed to win." Below that, a photograph, grainy, zoomed in, but there was no mistaking the image. It was Zoe. 7 years old, hair in little braids with purple beads, backpack on, standing outside her school, alone. Danielle didn't move for several seconds. Her eyes stayed locked on the photo. Her breathing slowed, but her mind raced. There were no fingerprints on the paper, no return address on the envelope, no sign of who sent it. But the message was clear. This was a warning. She had rattled someone. Badly. Danielle stood up slowly. Her office, once filled with quiet confidence, now felt too still. She picked up the phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Marcus. He didn't ask questions. He was already on his way to the school. The second was to Zoe's principal. Within 20 minutes, every door at the school was locked. Security was tripled. Zoe was kept in a secure room until her parents arrived. The third call was to a private investigator. Danielle wasn't just a businesswoman anymore. She was a mother preparing for war. By nightfall, her home security system was upgraded. Armed patrols were arranged. Every inch of her mall, office, and home was reviewed for gaps. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of fear settle into her chest, but only for a moment. Then it hardened into something else. Focus. She gathered her closest team members in a closed-door meeting. No suits. No coffee. No small talk. She laid the letter on the table. "This isn't about competition," she said. "It's a message. Someone's scared. They should be." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the stakes had changed. Danielle tasked her investigator with tracing the source of the letter, while her lawyer began reviewing every recent deal, every disgruntled partner, every terminated contract. Then something unexpected happened. The photo of Zoe turned out to be from a security camera across the street from the school. And that camera belonged to a nearby building owned by a former investor Danielle had removed months earlier. His name was Richard Crane, a man twice her age, 3 times her size, and yet somehow afraid of her. Richard was old money, came from a family that had always owned land, not earned it. He smiled through his teeth and didn't like being told no, especially not by a young black woman with more intelligence than patience for games. When Danielle bought the mall, he was part of the original group of investors. But over time, she noticed shady transactions, inflated invoices, and whispers of backdoor deals. She pushed him out, legally, quietly, cleanly. He never forgot. And now he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The investigator returned with more information. The camera had been accessed remotely. Emails were traced. A burner phone was found. The message was real, and it had come from Richard. Danielle had every reason to go public, to blast his name across the news, to shame him, ruin him. But she didn't. She did something smarter. She filed for a federal injunction, not just for harassment, for child endangerment. She gathered everything: photos, camera logs, internal emails, and handed it all to the authorities. Within days, Richard Crane's office was raided. The press didn't know who to believe at first. But Danielle didn't flinch. When the reporters finally came knocking, she issued a single statement. There are 2 kinds of people in this world: those who build quietly, and those who try to tear others down. The difference is one of them always gets caught. The news ran with it. Richard was arrested, charged with criminal intimidation and cyber surveillance. His reputation destroyed. His businesses under review. And Danielle, she walked out of the courthouse with her daughter in one hand and the red folder in the other. But something had changed in her. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about creating a legacy that couldn't be threatened. That week, she announced the launch of the Zoe Initiative, a nonprofit focused on teaching young girls from underrepresented communities about property ownership, investing, and protection. Her first seminar, booked out in 24 hours. But as she stood on stage, smiling, holding her daughter close, a quiet chill crept through her spine. In the back of the auditorium, a man stood alone. Black coat, sunglasses, watching. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He was just staring. And when she looked again, he was gone. Danielle Brooks had learned to survive in a world built to overlook her. She had learned to fight quietly, speak carefully, and move like chess while everyone else played checkers. But even with everything she had overcome, poverty, bias, betrayal, nothing prepared her for this. That man, in the crowd, the one with the black coat and dark glasses, he didn't belong there. She knew it the moment their eyes met. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't moved by her speech. He stood still while everyone else celebrated, and then, just like that, he was gone. Security couldn't find him. The cameras didn't catch him. It was like he vanished into the air. But Danielle knew better. People like that don't vanish. They wait. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Danielle kept the lights on. She sat at the foot of her bed, watching the baby monitor screen where Zoe was asleep in the next room. Marcus, her husband, tried to reassure her, but even he could see it in her eyes. Something wasn't right. The next morning, her team went over every frame of the security footage. Nothing. No entry logs, no door opened, no trace of the man in black. But then, tucked into one of the lobby camera loops, something strange appeared. It was a USB drive, taped beneath the welcome desk. Clean. Placed with care. Danielle had it scanned by her tech team. Inside was only one file. A video. Low quality. Black and white. A camera angle pointed at a storage room inside the mall. The door was open. In the frame stood the man from the auditorium. This time he wasn't wearing glasses, just staring into the camera. And then he spoke. "You think this ends with Richard?" he said, his voice calm, smooth. "This goes deeper than you know, Danielle. Much deeper. You've made enemies. Real ones. Walk away while you still can." The screen went black. No name, no demand, just a threat. Danielle didn't flinch. She called her lawyer, her tech lead, and her head of security. The mall was placed on high alert. Her staff doubled. Zoe's school route was changed. The police were looped in, but Danielle knew this wasn't something the law could fix alone. This wasn't just one man. This was a network. People who had been watching her, waiting, planning. It explained why the earlier betrayal came so easily, why Richard felt untouchable. He wasn't working alone. He was just one piece in a much larger game. Danielle did something that surprised even her own team. She shut down the mall. For 3 days, Jennings Plaza closed its doors. Every store, every hallway, every camera was inspected. Contractors were brought in to check for hidden devices. Background checks were rerun. Every tenant was asked to report any suspicious visitors, calls, or notes. And during that time, Danielle wasn't in hiding. She was in control. She held private strategy sessions from her office. She documented everything. She assigned her legal team to trace Richard's financials, and she had her investigator look into her early investors, searching for anyone with links to criminal money, blackmail rings, or shadow buyers. And then something broke. A forgotten shell company tied to a lease on the 3rd floor led to an offshore account. That account paid for over 17 business fronts across the city. One name kept showing up. L.R. Kingston. A name Danielle didn't recognize. A name that never appeared in public filings. But each transaction pointed back to Jennings Plaza. Her mall was being used, laundered through, masked. Someone had been using her property as a front, and she had no idea. Her heart sank not in fear but in fury. Everything she'd built, everything she stood for, was being corrupted behind her back. Not only did they try to silence her, they tried to use her. But they underestimated one thing. Danielle Brooks never stopped at uncovering the truth. She exposed it. She drafted a report. Every file, every financial link, every hidden transaction. And she didn't go to the press. She went to the FBI. By the time they arrived, Danielle had her building clean, her staff briefed, and her lawyers ready. The moment she handed over the evidence, the agent looked at her and said, "You've done half our work for us." She replied, without blinking, "You're welcome. Now finish it." But even with the investigation underway, even with Jennings Plaza being scrubbed of its secrets, Danielle knew the man in the video wasn't gone. He had warned her, which meant he was watching. And late that night, as Danielle sat at her desk once more, reviewing the last of the contracts tied to Kingston's shell companies, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. One sentence. "You're in deeper than you think." The mall was just the beginning. Danielle stared at the screen. This wasn't about Jennings Plaza anymore. This was something much bigger. Danielle Brooks had reached the edge, not of fear, not of defeat, but of a decision. She had uncovered the money trail. She had exposed the shell companies. She had handed the files to the FBI. And still the threats continued. Still the silence lingered. The man in black -L.R. Kingston, or whoever he really was, hadn't made another appearance. But his words echoed through her mind. Danielle sat alone in her office that night. No staff. No lights, except for the lamp on her desk. The city moved quietly beyond the glass windows, but inside the room, the air was still. On the table in front of her sat three things: her phone, a sealed envelope marked FBI response, confidential, and a single framed photo of Zoe. She thought about how it all began. Being followed in her own mall, being underestimated, being threatened, being told over and over again that she didn't belong. And now here she was, not just fighting to protect a mall, but fighting to protect what she represented. A young black woman who had built something honest, something powerful, something real, and someone out there wanted to erase it. But not today, not ever. The next morning, Danielle called a press conference. Not in a boardroom, not at a hotel ballroom, right in the heart of Jennings Plaza. She stood in the center of the mall atrium, under the skylight, sunlight pouring down on her shoulders. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Crowds formed at the upper levels, leaning over the rails. Every tenant had been invited. Every employee present. Danielle stepped up to the microphone. Her voice didn't shake. "I built this place to bring life into this city," she said. "To create opportunity, not cover up crime. I've learned that while you're busy building, there will always be people trying to dig tunnels underneath your foundation. But you can't destroy what's rooted in truth." She held up the FBI letter. "For the past 3 months, my property was being used as part of a criminal money laundering scheme without my knowledge. I uncovered it. I reported it. And now, with full cooperation from the authorities, I can tell you this investigation is leading to multiple arrests across state lines." She paused. "This is bigger than real estate. This is about being brave enough to shine light in places people want kept dark." The room was silent. Then she looked directly into the nearest camera. "And to the people who sent threats to my family, this is the last time you'll feel safe hiding behind fake names and private networks. Because I don't just own a mall, I own my name, my story, my future. And you don't own fear anymore." The crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, real. Some clapped with tears in their eyes, some with hands over their hearts, some with their children beside them, finally seeing someone who looked like them stand in her full power. That same week, federal indictments were issued. L.R. Kingston's real name was uncovered Leonard Raymond Klein, a man tied to corporate fraud, private shell networks, and silent takeovers of properties across the country. He had used front men like Richard Crane to hide behind. But Danielle's report had torn it all apart. Leonard was arrested trying to board a private flight in Miami, his final mistake, underestimating the woman who refused to be afraid. With the case closed, Danielle took a break. Just 1 week. No meetings, no headlines. Just Marcus, Zoe, and a small rented cabin by the lake. She didn't need luxury to feel at peace. She just needed the sound of her daughter laughing again. One afternoon, while Zoe played near the water, Danielle sat on the porch with a pen and notebook. For once, she wasn't planning a business deal. She wasn't reviewing security. She was writing something for Zoe. A letter. It began like this. One day, you'll grow up and hear people tell you that power doesn't look like you. That success doesn't sound like your voice. But you'll know better. Because your mother didn't just survive the storm. She turned it into her story. And when they tried to write her out of it, she picked up the pen. Danielle folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it inside her journal. The sun dipped behind the trees. Zoe ran up the porch steps, out of breath and smiling. Danielle scooped her up with one arm, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're safe now." Zoe giggled. "Of course I am, Mommy. You own everything." Danielle laughed softly. "No," she said. "I just protect what's mine." And in that moment there were no enemies. No threats. No games. Just peace. And a legacy that could never be stolen.